Coming up on this week's edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
What are the challenges and opportunities for the next generation of farmers and ranchers? We'll talk with a group of young producers about some of the biggest issues facing the beef industry.
And now, a special edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen with host Kevin Oxner.
Time now for a Beltway Beef Spotlight. Officers of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association play a vital role in representing the interests of the cattle industry. Earlier this month, NCBA officers Jennifer Houston, Marty Smith, Don Schiefelbein, and members of the Virginia Cattlemen's Association joined President Donald Trump at the White House to help roll out the president's plan for rural broadband coverage. NCBA appreciates the president's commitment to rural America and his efforts on behalf of cattlemen and women. That's this week's Beltway Beef Spotlight.
Want to stay on top of the issues in Washington? Just follow the Beltway Beef feed on Twitter for all the latest updates. And if you're an NCBA member, you'll receive the Beltway Beef newsletter, a weekly update straight from the NCBA team in Washington, D.C. Isn't it time you joined NCBA to be a part of the fight on trade issues and other policies that affect the beef cattle industry? Just call 1-866-233-3872, or you can visit the website ncba.org. We've talked often on this show about the Earth's growing population and the critical role U.S. beef will play in feeding the world. But in order to meet this challenge, we're going to need to attract young farmers and ranchers to help ensure the beef industry is sustainable for years to come. So how do we get young people interested in raising cattle and ensure those already in the business want to stick around? Fortunately, we have a great group of young producers here today to share some of their wisdom about those issues and how to tackle them. To begin with, we welcome Rossi Stevens. She's originally from North Carolina, but now makes her home in Kansas. Tell us about yourself, Rossi.
That's right. I am from Grinnell, Kansas in northwest Kansas, and I live with my husband and we run a feedlot. So we have H.J. Stevens & Sons Feedlot, and we have 2 locations in Grinnell and Goodland. And I work in the feedlot office as well as run my own business called RBS Ag Consulting, where I help other ag industry jobs and
businesses, sure.
Businesses, right.
Sure.
Right.
And Dusty, you join us from Big Sky Country, is that right?
Yes, sir. This is Dusty Hahn from Townsend, Montana, which is up near Helena, the capital city. I'm on a family operation, which is a cow-calf operation. It's a cash farm, and we have a trucking company as well. Hahn Ranch is the name of our business. I'm the 4th generation on the ranch. My cousin's kids are the 5th generation coming up, and both sides of my family have been ranching in Montana for about 5 generations now.
Great, strong history. With its own set of challenges when you have a multi-generation operation, I suppose.
And I just want to mention as well that we are the Region 5 Environmental Stewardship winners for this year. And headed to NCBA to take on the national competition.
Absolutely, huge honor. And the next young lady, somebody I've known for a long time, Corey Harrison Malone from Illinois. Corey, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, we're located in Minear, Illinois, and there my husband and I, along with my parents, operate a 100-head cow-calf operation. In addition to that, I'm an instructor of animal science at Illinois State University.
That's great. And Jared, you come to us from Missouri, is that right? Jared Wareham.
Yeah, God's country. So yeah, I'm a first-generation agriculturalist. Also run a cow-calf operation with my family, as well as write for Drover's Magazine. But what I do on a daily basis, most of my time is dominated with a company called Top Dollar Angus.
Outstanding. Well, I'm curious because each of you have had different paths, slightly different paths getting into the beef industry, and so I'm curious to just learn a little bit more about that. Dusty, let's start with you. You come from a long line of ranchers in Montana. Talk to us about how you got your start.
Okay, I actually didn't start out to be in agriculture. I went to college and I was supposed to be in engineering, And I did that about a semester and discovered that that wasn't where my passion was, and switched to an agricultural major, graduated from college and returned home to the family operation, and I think that they were pleasantly surprised that that was my choice in life. So
Fantastic. Corey, tell us about your path.
Yeah, I can't really remember a time that I wasn't involved in the cattle industry, so it has been a part of my family for as long as I can remember. I'm a 4th generation cattle farmer as well. Went to college at Oklahoma State in animal science, and it's always been a part of my life. It gets in your blood. We were all just talking, before this, that it really does get in your blood, and I've never left, and I'm very lucky that now I get to teach college students about my passion.
Well, so tell us how you split your time. You are a professor and also have a cattle operation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, during calving season, I don't sleep, so I run on a lot of Diet Coke. But you know what? When you're passionate about it, it's kind of just like it works. And a lot of times, my morning might start very early, with morning chores and that kind of thing. And then I go do my day job, and then at night I end with the cows again. So it's a family operation, though. We make it all work, and we split time. So
that's fantastic.
Somehow it works.
Yes. Rossi, obviously you have a strong background in the beef cattle business, but didn't launch right into production agriculture. Tell us about your journey.
That's right. So I started out, as you said, I'm from North Carolina. After I graduated, I went to DC. So I was the intern for NCBA. I was their public policy intern first. And I stayed in DC and worked for the Animal Ag Alliance and then for a local House of Representatives member, so a congressman. So I started off there, and after that I went to work for NCBA, and then I married my husband and moved to the operation. But when I was working for the congressman, I wasn't all agriculture. I was helping him answer correspondence to all of his constituents, and I always had that need for being in agriculture, and I helped him with his ag-related issues, but I did kind of stray from the path and come back.
Does it make you appreciate being involved in production agriculture more now when you had a job off the farm for a while?
Definitely, and we got a lot of calls into the congressman's office. He was heavy agriculture as a congressman, so there were a lot of people that didn't understand the different issues, and I was one of those that answered the calls or answered the letters, and so it was interesting to see different perspectives and kind of bring them back and kind of relate those to agriculture and how I lived my life up until that point.
That's great. Now, Jared, you were telling me you're really first generation farmer and rancher. Is that right? Tell us about your background.
That's correct. It's multiple generations since I guess you could say my family was involved at any level in agriculture. Okay. But as a kid growing up, we'd always come back to visit the grandma, great grandma's farm, and have that connection to the beef side of it. And it's what I just love to do. And of course, grew up not entirely connected to it, and so it was not until I got into college I just never really let myself realize that it could be a real legitimate career path. And it was my sophomore year of college, and I had an elective hour. I took an animal science class as an elective, and within 5 minutes I knew that's what I had to do. And it was 5 minutes in Dr. Allen's class, and I knew, and then the rest is history. I mean, it's like a switch was flipped. And
so how have you made your way back into production agriculture?
The hard way. So just passion, hard work, and like Corey said, when you enjoy it that much, it's just kind of what you do. It's like an old pair of socks or an old pair of jeans. It just feels right. So my wife and I, we weren't married until I got out of college, but even when I was still in college, worked on piecing together some land with some beginning farmers loans and opportunities for that were there for young agriculturalists. Built a cow herd up. We're up to about 100 head operation, like I mentioned earlier, and so obviously had some family involved in that's made that possible and been involved in that. But you can't be afraid to roll your sleeves up and get after it.
Take some risks, right? Well, I want to talk a little bit. You mentioned family, and I'm curious, for those of you that are coming back to a family operation, were there changes that need to be made, either with the structure or the financing of a family operation to create an opportunity, a legitimate opportunity for you to come back? Dusty, you want to begin?
Sure. Right up front, there wasn't a lot of change that needed to be made because there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And coming right out of college, you just jump into the work and get to doing it. And after a while, there are, you start to develop some expectations of what the business expects from you and what you expect from the business, how you're going to be compensated for your work. and you do need to have enough enterprises, or I guess the right amount of cash flow in place, whether that's through different enterprises or expanding the enterprise that you're already working in, to make sure that everybody's expectations for the business and for yourself are being met.
Now, Rossi, you kind of married into a multi-generational family. What type of complexity does that add, or guidance would you give people when they're entering that kind of situation?
Right. I'm from a third-generation cattle operation, but they're from across the country.
Right.
So I came into this family, and at first I didn't think I was going to work at the feedlot. I was going to do my job and my consulting business, and then we kind of developed a program. We started a new feedlot database, and so that was kind of my niche. I knew that was where I could fit back in. Now I'm going in every day and working the latter half of the day at the feedlot in the office. But it was, it's an adjustment to go into another person's family and try to figure out everybody and how they work. But my brother-in-laws, they're all coming back to the operation as well. So they're having to find out who's doing what and how they all fit into the puzzle.
Yeah, it creates a much more professional approach when you have multiple folks and multiple different family members engaged in that. Corey, what have you learned coming back to a multi-generation operation?
Yeah, I would say probably the biggest thing that we learned was how to break down some communication barriers. I would say that when we first came back, kind of going off of what both of these two said, you come back at first and you start, and it's like everybody doesn't know what the goal is, so we're all meeting it, right? And so when we were able to kind of define our goals of our family operation, those lines of communication kind of opened up, and I will say that some technological advances helped us along the way. There's some great apps and things like that for record keeping and tracking finances and that kind of thing, so that really helped us. But I would say the communication barrier was the biggest hurdle that we had to overcome in our family operation.
So what do you say to viewers who are sitting out there who maybe like some of you, either had a relative who had a farm or ranch or grew up showing some livestock, but they're just not sure, is the beef business a real career opportunity for them? What would you tell them?
I would say that, if it's their passion, our industry needs talent at all levels. It doesn't matter if you're an engineer, marketing, communications, finance. I mean, we need talent. So if you have a passion for being in this industry, you can enter it and be successful and be a professional at multiple, in multiple channels, multiple outlets to get you in here. And then perhaps, if beef production ultimately is where you want to end up, and then you never know, maybe you work that direction. And there is a demand for good quality professional beef production professionals, but there's just so many other layers of needed talent in this industry that I think don't close those doors, because there's a lot of opportunity.
That's great advice. We have a lot more ground to cover before we're through. Coming up, our panel will discuss the benefits of getting involved with both your state and national cattle organizations. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
At Case IH, we believe it's our job to provide you with solutions. That's why our Farmall and Maxim tractors, as well as our tools and attachments, are designed with you in mind. From mowing to baling to loading and more, we're here to help turn your to-dos into to-dones. At Case IH, we'll keep your days running smoothly with equipment that's durable, versatile, and highly efficient. No wonder farmers are more loyal to Case IH than any other brand. Visit your local dealer or go to caseih.com/livestock for more.
When it comes to the beef business, there's no room for gray area. The decisions being made in Washington affect the future of the beef industry, the livelihood of your fellow farmers and ranchers. Your National Cattlemen's Beef Association knows there's what benefits cattlemen and there's what doesn't. To us, it's as clear as black and white. Visit joinncba.org to learn more.
What does it mean to be an American cattleman? It means you have what it takes where it counts, on the inside. At Ritchie, we understand that. It's what's on the inside that defines us. We share the same values: ingenuity, commitment, sense of pride. These are the values that built this country. They're the values that built this company. Ritchie, proud to be a partner to the American cattleman since 1921.
Welcome back to this special edition of Cattlemen to Cattlemen. NCBA is a grassroots organization where members come together to set policy positions. This process starts at the state and county level and is critical to the long-term success of the industry. We ask NCBA President Jennifer Houston why it's so important to get producers of all ages involved in the policy-making process.
Well, it's so important for the survival of our industry. We do have an aging population of farmers and ranchers, and I think we lost a generation of times when things were hard on the farm and mom and dad told us to go out and find another job. But the positive thing is I travel around the state conventions, I'm seeing more and more young people. So I think it's really important that we get them engaged in our associations, engaged in the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Well, one of our outstanding programs is the Young Cattlemen's Conference. We take it each year and states nominate an outstanding young producer from their state to really get to see the whole gamut of the beef industry, from our offices in Denver to our packing facilities, to processing facilities. We end up in Washington, D.C. We visit our legislators, and it's a really opportunity because so many of us don't get to see the whole spectrum. We know that part that we're engaged in. So it's a learning opportunity, and I think it really develops because we see a lot of those YCC alumni become leaders in their state and on the national level.
We're back now with our panel of young producers. Now, I guess I would ask you all are members of both your state and the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, is that right?
Yes.
So what do you see as the value of being members at both of those levels? Rossi?
So I grew up with an interesting background. My dad is the exec of the North Carolina Cattlemen's Association. Yeah. So I grew up going and helping with conventions since I was little. We were the extra hands. So I really believe in how strong you can be in the county level. I'm a county chair for KLA. Moving up to the state level and on to the national level, you can bring those experiences, the different policy you bring forward, all of the different interactions you have in those local communities and bring them to that national level. All very important.
Corey, what would you add?
Yeah, I would add that the educational opportunities for producers is probably one of the greatest benefits in my opinion. Programs like BQA, MBA, those type of programs. And the reason I say that is I think that consumers are wanting to know that producers are taking every step possible to ensure the safest beef supply and that has been produced in the safest and most efficient way, I should say. And so essentially I think programs like that are kind of creating a more sustainable product for us. So.
Great. Jared, what are the benefits of participating both at the state as well as the national level?
Well, I think it's important to be focused on the policy and collaborate, whether it's at the state level and or the federal or national level. Issues such as trade or regulatory overreach, things like that aren't going they're not going away, and we have to make sure that they can't limit our ability to make a living in beef production.
And to piggyback off of him, when you're starting at a policy level on the state level, one state's going to have different issues than another state. Sure. So once you talk about those policies among your state, you can figure out what you want to bring to the national level. And that's what we decide on at things here like the Cattle Industry Convention.
That's a great point. Dusty, what's been your experience in both the state and national level of involvement?
I think that the networking is very important at both the state and national level. You know, you go to your state association meetings and you get to interact with producers from across your state, find out what the issues are that are common to your state. And then you go to the national level and you're meeting people from all over the U.S. and potentially outside of the U.S. and getting to air your opinions and hear their opinions on the same issues and exchange ideas as well and just meet people and know people all over your state and all over the country. It's a great asset to your business.
It really is. That networking element really is a huge benefit. And I wanted to follow up on that because I was going to ask you point blank, I mean, have you found people through your involvement with NCBA and your state organizations that have become advisors or mentors or supporters of yours? Tell us a little bit about that, Corey.
Yeah, you know, I think it would be hard if you asked just for one name of one person that was a mentor, because there's so many in this industry that have acted as a mentor. To myself, I would say this industry more than any has people willing to help those wanting to learn more. and get involved in the industry. So that can be all different age ranges too. You know, I find mentors in people my own age as well. I think we're going to talk about YCC here in a minute, and so I found a lot of people in my YCC class as mentors too, once I got to meet them. So.
Fantastic. Jared, what would you add?
Well, I think the mentors are extremely important. Don't ever miss an opportunity to network. You know, come to these events, and you may not have a specific purpose to be here other than that, and to get your name out, to meet new people, whether they're older people, middle-aged, or younger, like yourself, and like Dusty said, have them, you know, collaborate with people all over the country, in addition to people from all over the world. And I think, you know, there's so much value in that, you can't overlook it. So I think, you know, and you'll find those people that'll end up being mentors, and more than you know, and then it'll kind of grow into maybe a greater role over time.
So let's talk about the Cattle Industry Convention and NCBA trade show. I'm always amazed, and it seems like we have more young people coming than we once did. But I don't know if sometimes it's because the young folks are left behind at home to do chores while mom and dad or grandma and grandpa come, or whether it's that young people don't feel like there's any benefit of coming. What would you say to young people in terms of the benefit of coming to the Cattle Industry Annual Convention? Dusty?
I would say that you just need to come and experience it. This is how you're going to kind of get your feet wet in the industry, and there's things as simple as wander around the trade show and look at the exhibits. There's a multitude of different exhibits, and there's so much to learn there. Again, meet people from across the industry and shake their hand, and you'll probably run into them down the road somewhere.
Rossi, what value have you seen in the convention and NCBA trade show?
Well, one thing I would really recommend to young producers is going to Cattlemen's College.
Sure.
So Cattlemen's College, they have great education, all different types of speakers. So if you are from a cow-calf operation or from a feedlot, or you're doing more of the marketing and kind of out of the industry but still working within, there's something for everybody there. And you can choose different tracks. You can choose to go to one speaker versus the other throughout the day. And it's a 2-day event. So you can really learn a lot and kind of pick and choose what you would like to go to.
It's great insight. Thank you all for your comments. Now don't go away. We'll have more insights from our panel of producers, including their thoughts on the Young Cattlemen's Conference, right after this.
The elements can be relentless. Make sure they have respiratory protection to match.
Run with us on a John Deere 3E Series tractor and add an attachment or two. Because it's time to turn this land and everything on it, as far as the eye can see, into your land. Nothing runs like a Deere. Run with us. Search John Deere 3E Series for more.
Welcome back. Each year, future beef industry leaders from across the country meet in Denver, Colorado to participate in the Young Cattlemen's Conference, or YCC. Organized and hosted by NCBA, YCC participants will travel from Denver to Chicago and then on to Washington, D.C., learning about each segment of the beef industry along the way. We asked John Robinson, NCBA's Vice President of Membership and Communications, to tell us more about the benefits of YCC.
Well, YCC stands for the Young Cattlemen's Conference, and for more than 25 years it's really been the industry's premier leadership development program at the national level for cattle producers from across the country to get a bigger feel for the industry beyond their ranch gate. So, you know, whatever their segment of the industry is, it exposes them to all segments of the industry, and also NCBA's role in making sure that we're protecting the interests of the beef industry. You know, NCBA is a firm believer in supporting the next generation of future beef leaders. Our organization depends heavily on our volunteer leaders, and this is really an opportunity for us to expose folks early in their career and mentor them so that they can become better leaders, not only for the association but also for the entire beef industry.
And we're back with our panel of young beef producers. I know each one of you were nominated and actually participated in the Young Cattlemen's Conference, and I've heard so many good things about it. I'm curious, what did you learn on the trip? Jared?
Well, I think the main thing I learned was that your neighborhood, is only as small or as big as you want to make it. And, I made so many friends on that trip. My network grew tremendously, and I travel a lot for work. I'm fortunate to have actually been on a good portion of the friends operations that I met on that trip. And I think we're like little girls. We communicate through text messages all the time. We're always asking stuff about other people's operations. Hey, I've got this problem. What would you do here? Hey, I know this guy. What do you know about him? And things like that. And so that network you put together, those friends are lifelong. And I've also, you find more people in the industry that have been through that program. I've been walking through the airport and had somebody notice my pin on my lapel and say, hey, I was class of whatever. And I have, my editor at Drovers, Greg Henderson, was YCC graduate. Tom Brink, who I work for, owns Top Dollar Angus, was a class of, YCC class. So you find these other leaders that are, ahead of you. Sure. And so it kind of inspires you, and you kind of feel like you are a part of that ascending population of leaders that's in the industry. So all that really for me.
That's fantastic. Corey, what did you learn?
I don't really come from what we would term cattle country in Illinois. So for me, I suppose my favorite thing to learn was to see the industry across the country, not only through the events that YCC provides, but to also hear the stories through my classmates' ranches and farms. We had a classmate that ranched in Hawaii and then one all the way down in Florida that would talk about, issues with alligators, and so I guess it was just, I really enjoyed seeing that even though we all take different steps to get there, we're all working towards the same goal, and that is a safer, more efficient beef supply. So,
Rossi, how did the trip impact you?
I really just liked getting to see all the different segments of our industry. Okay. So like you said, we started off in Denver. We learned about NCBA, how the association works for us as producers. Went on to Chicago. I really enjoyed going to McDonald's, except for they didn't service Big Macs. But,
no kidding.
We can look past that. And then we went on to DC, and you learn about the policy and why we're in this and why it's so important that we talk to our representatives and really get to know just all the different segments of the industry and how they all play into what we're doing.
And what impact did it have for a Western ranch kid, Dusty?
Well, these three covered a lot of what I was going to talk about, but the one thing that I did learn too that's important is it's as an individual, it's your responsibility to show up and be seen, because the state and the national organizations are representing your interests, but people like your congressmen and also the people that are running the state and the national association, they see their constituents quite often, but they don't see the producers from out in the field and shake their hands and get to talk to them face to face to find out what the issues are. And it really is important if you have time to make the time and go do that.
So what would you say to somebody watching at home, a young producer who is considering being nominated or trying to get nominated? What advice would you give them, Corey?
Do it. I tell people all the time that YCC changed my life, and that's something that I mean. Not only from an educational standpoint, I think I learned more in those 10 days than maybe I've ever learned, but also it really ignites this passion in you that you have, and you're just on fire for the beef industry.
Fantastic. A truly unique and sounds like life-changing experience. Fantastic. Still ahead, we'll talk with our panel about some of the issues coming out of Washington that could have a big impact on their operations. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Saddle up and make your way to Denver, Colorado for the 2019 Cattle Industry Summer Business Meeting. This is your chance to stay up to date on beef industry trends and policies. Meet with industry leaders and your fellow cattlemen and women. Plus, you'll get insights on hot topics at the issues forums. Mark your calendar for the 2019 Cattle Industry Summer Business Meeting, July 29th to August 1st in Denver. Details at ncba.org.
How's your production on pasture? Are profits down? Are weight gains down? What are you going to do about it? Do something cost-effective. Do something that will make a difference. To add the first and proven leader in feed-through hornfly control to your cattle rations, ask for it by name, Alticid IGR.
Say goodbye to your toughest pasture and rangeland weeds for good. Because one product offers season-long control, handles the widest spectrum of broadleaf weeds, and clears the way for increased forage with greater grazing flexibility. So you get more beef per acre at a cost that can't be beat. It's Graze On Next HL herbicide, and if it's in your pastures, plain and simple, weeds won't be.
Welcome back. When we ask producers about the value of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, one of the first answers they give is how the organization provides a strong voice in Washington on behalf of the cattle industry. Colin Woodall, NCBA's Senior Vice President of Government Affairs, explains the benefits of young producers contacting their members of Congress about the issues that could impact their operations.
The Young Cattlemen's Conference, YCC, is a very valuable program because what it does, it allows the next generation of cattle producers to come to Washington, D.C. and see firsthand the decisions that are made on Capitol Hill and at the White House and through the federal departments that have an impact on their ability to keep doing what they're doing. And it's our goal to make sure that they appreciate that, understand it, and more importantly, want to be engaged in it, because it's the grassroots engagement that drives this association. It's also the grassroots engagement that drives policy decisions made on Capitol Hill, and all of those have a direct impact on the bottom line of every producer. It's been our experience throughout the years that most of the participants in YCC come in and have a much better understanding of Washington, D.C. What we find is most of the times they've never even been to Washington, D.C., much less have they really paid attention to the legislative process and everything that our Congress does and that our federal departments do. And when they finally see that, and more importantly, see our role in engaging and advocating on behalf of producers, it gets them excited, it gets them interested, and we see them in a lot of times as the up-and-coming leadership of this association.
We're back with our group of experts as they share their thoughts on some of the most important issues facing the beef industry. So I'm curious, what are some of the issues based out of Washington, D.C. from a policy standpoint that are keeping you up late at night? Dusty?
Currently it's trade that's keeping me awake at night. I'd like to see some of these trade negotiations get handled quickly and make fair trade for the U.S. I realize that trade's always going to be an issue that's ongoing, and I feel good about having NCBA at the table and being involved in some of these negotiations to make sure that they come out favorable for agriculture, and just keeping unfavorable policy in check that comes out of Washington, D.C. and maybe from outside the country too, that puts pressure on us as ag producers. It's good to know that we have a good team back there keeping track of that and getting us fired up to help them help us.
Great point. Corey?
Yeah, I would say one thing that's been on my state association's radar is definitely that of fake meat and making sure that it is regulated and labeled properly. We just don't want any misleading information out there for the consumer, as it seems that they are inundated with deceptive marketing claims in the grocery store. So,
yeah, we need only to look at what's happened in the alternative milk segments to see what could occur in that regard, right? So these challenges and issues we're facing right now, I think, are critically important. We talked about Young Cattlemen's Conference. We didn't talk about the legislative conference. And Rossi, I'm curious, you worked back there, obviously, for a congressman. What's your perspective on the importance of young cattlemen getting involved in things like the legislative conference?
Well, I started going to the legislative conference as an intern with NCBA, and it's very important for us to have those boots on the hill moments. So if you can go to your congressman's office, your senator's office, talk to them about the issues that are facing you as a producer, that's somebody coming from their constituency. That's who's voting for them and putting them in office. So it's very important that they hear those things from us as producers. And while our NCBA staff does a great job at telling our story, it's way better to have somebody from their district come in and talk to them one-on-one.
You bet. Take some time away from your own operation, but it's absolutely worth it.
That's right. That's right.
So I'm curious, how did the trip and the involvement in Washington, D.C. change your perception about what gets done or doesn't get done in Washington, D.C.? Jared, what did you learn?
Well, I think you learn right off that, and this is one way it was put to us as we were on that trip, that there's a lot of motion in D.C., but never a lot of movement. And so it requires a lot of pressure and connectivity, to make sure policy moves in the direction it needs to move, and to stay on top of things and make sure something doesn't come out of left field. And like we talked about earlier, some of those, regulatory overreaches don't, hinder us like what WOTUS had done in the past, and if that hasn't gone away. And so that's, so I'd say pressure and connectivity is what it requires.
And Rossi, you know both the cattle industry, but also kind of the inner workings of that system, having worked in the Congressman's office back there. What do we need to know?
So I was a legislative correspondent, which meant I helped the congressman write his letters back to the constituents, figure out what those issues were that we were talking about and their constituents were writing in on, and then figure out how to answer them. So one thing that I would say, NCBA and maybe your state associations, they'll do call to actions. When that happens, definitely write a letter. Don't just take what they said and send it in a form letter. I've sorted through those form letters, and you would say, you have 248 form letters. Here's the one guy that wrote about how this is affecting him and his operation. So it's really important to write that letter or call that congressman with an actual story and not just a form.
That's great insight. Thank you so much. And we'll have more insights from our panel of producers, including their thoughts on the challenge of reaching out to consumers when we return.
The 2020 Cattle Industry Convention and NCBA Trade Show will be deep in the heart of Texas, San Antonio. It's the cattle industry's biggest convention with education, networking, and fun. Plus, you can check out the huge NCBA Trade Show, outstanding entertainment, and much more. So make your plans and be there for the 2020 Cattle Industry Convention and NCBA Trade Show, February 5th through the 7th. Details at ncba.org.
Welcome back to NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen, as we get insights from young cattle producers about the opportunities and threats they face in the beef cattle industry. Now let's turn our attention to consumer wants and demands and how that impacts the beef business. I'm curious, we talk a lot on this show about the increased consumer desire for more transparency in not only how, but where their beef is produced. I'm curious, how is that going to impact the beef industry moving forward from your perspective, Jared?
Well, I think you can see some of those impacts, taking shape today, all over the country. I mean, you've got a lot of farm-to-table type operations and springing up of all sizes. I mean, traditionally, when we thought about that a decade or two ago, they were very small and maybe compartmentalized. Now they're huge. For example, with like what Walmart and 44 Farms is doing, with what the Valley Oak Steak Company is doing in my home state of Missouri, and the regionally or beef that's locally or regionally grown, or what Lentz's are doing. And so those programs are kind of exciting because it ties consumer interest and gets them kind of leveraged into the future of our beef industry. They want to know more. They want to have a quality product, but maybe have a little extra to it. And so, for the producers or the entrepreneurs out there in our industry that have the resources and maybe the vision and insight to put it in motion, I think there's a lot of opportunity.
Neat value-added opportunities. And particularly we talk about the younger generation, millennials and even younger. Do you think folks like yourselves, just by virtue of your age, are better at connecting with these folks? Corey, you spend every day with younger folks, right?
Yeah, I like to think so. I like to think that we're more effective communicators with I guess the younger generation, I think we are maybe a little better at understanding different social media platforms and that kind of thing. One, this gentleman sitting here, Dusty, actually made a great social media post regarding some antibiotic use on his ranch. And I remember I saw some of my students sharing it on Facebook, and it was kind of this aha moment, like, wow, it really, really does circulate and get out there. And it was kind of fun to be able to say, hey, I know him from YCC. So it makes a difference. It gets out there, and yeah, I'd like to think that we are effective communicators with the younger generation.
Rossi, do you agree? Is there some unique ways that you can connect with that next generation of consumers to build trust?
I think social media is a big platform that we have, and just getting out there and telling our story. So, you know, they like to hear things from people in their age group, from their peers. Sure. So if we're helping, you know, tell those stories, there's a lot of misconceptions out there. So if we're helping combat those things and telling them, well, this is why we do it the way we do it, and this is why you should trust our not only our product, but all beef products, because they're all safe and nutritious.
That's great. So I'm curious, guys, I mean, you are the future of the beef industry. What is your take on the future of the beef business? Are you optimistic, Rossi?
I am. And like I said, those misconceptions they're huge out there right now, but I think that we can combat those because we have a great industry that's very passionate about what they do, and our main goal is just to get our stories out there.
Dusty, what would you say?
I'd say the story is very important. I think we have a lot of buy-in from the consumer on our story. I mean, they want to believe in the cowboy image and the Western lifestyle, open spaces, and we're showing them how we're preserving them, trying to be more transparent. On our particular operation, we host tours from time to time, and we're trying to get journalists and chefs, people of influential nature in there to see what we're doing and maybe put a positive spin on from an outlet that we wouldn't normally have access to, and even get buy-in from international consumers. I mean, we have a very flavorful, desirable product, and we want to be first in the marketplace. We want to do a good job.
Jared, any thoughts relative to our position in the future and how optimistic you are about the future of the beef business?
Well, I think everybody in the beef industry should be optimistic. I mean, long term, the outlook's tremendous. I mean, we know that the population is growing, and you know all the statistics about wealth accumulation and their demand and their desire to consume a beef product. Short term, you're always going to have challenges. That's never going to change. But I would say, it's definitely a time to be very optimistic.
I couldn't agree more. And we'll be back with our good friend Baxter Black right after this.
When you're raising cattle, you might have to solve a dozen problems before you even get through your first cup of coffee. Still, one thing we don't ever have to worry about is implant performance.
We use Synvex Swingrass. It's the only true 200-day trim-blown acetate implant for grazing steers and heifers.
And you can actually drink this before it gets cold. Whew, that'll put hair on your chest.
At Leachman Cattle, we're committed to building more profitable cattle. As a third-generation seed stock producer, our family has been in this business for over 80 years. Today, we have the best technology ever to build more profitable cattle. Our dollar profit index is a leader in the industry to help you balance all the traits that drive your bottom line. Give us a call or go to www.leachman to learn more.
We know you're up before the dawn because the cattle rise before the sun. And you spend long hours in the saddle because the herd isn't always over the next rise. And you care for the land because you know it takes care of your family. And we know you do great work. And it's time to tell that story to the marketplace. IMI Global is here to help you do just that.
Let me tell you about my cousin Luther. He is a hunter's hunter, hunting fish. And he called one winter and said he wanted to come and visit, and I said, well, gosh, Luther, we'd be glad to have you. Well, when they showed up, they hadn't been here 5 minutes when he said he'd sure like to go hunting. I said, Luther, it's the middle of the winter. Oh, he said, there's bound to be something. call the fishing game. So I did, and sure enough, it was duck season. Now I gotta tell you, there's some crazy people in the world, and the craziest of them all is duck hunters. Get up in the middle of the night, in the middle of the winter, go out and stand in water all day up to their buckle, and then shoot a duck. But Luther had to go. So we went out and hunted all day long along the edge of the bank amongst them cattle and did not get duck number one. We come in that night and I was frozen solid. But Luther said, "I'll tell you what, there's plenty of ducks out there. We just ain't getting close enough." I said, "Well, what are we gonna do?" He said, "We'll disguise ourselves as a cow and then we can sneak right up on them." I said, "Are you crazy? Where are we gonna get a cow disguise?" He said, "Call the packing house." So we went down to Wilcox and picked one up. Big old soggy one, weighed 200 pounds. And then we took a roping dummy and made a head. So there we are the next morning. Sun coming up over the lake. We're walking along the edge of the bank there, and Luther's in the front, holding up the head and peering out through the eye hole. I'm hiking along there in the back when all of a sudden I see something. I grabbed Luther by the leg. I said, "Luther, look around here, boy." Luther, he looked around, and coming up behind us was a great big bull. And I mean, that sucker had a smile on his face and he was coming our way. I said, "Luther, what are we gonna do?" He said, "I'm gonna start grazing. You better brace yourself." This is Baxter Black from out there.
Thanks, Baxter. We always appreciate your contributions to our show. Want to rewatch an episode of Cattlemen to Cattlemen or catch up on anything you've missed? Then visit our YouTube page. You'll find replays of all of our shows filled with educational segments and producer profiles from around the country. So check us out at youtube.com/Cattlemen to Cattlemen. We'll be back with some final thoughts from our panel right after this.
Are you concerned about the impact government policies could have on your cattle business? One way to make your voice heard in Washington is by joining NCBA. When you join, you'll have access to key policy updates and insights from Beltway Beef. It's the best way to hear directly from NCBA's DC team. Beltway Beef provides valuable policy information, and it's free for NCBA members. Stay in touch with Beltway Beef. Join now at ncba.org.
If you're connected with the beef cattle business, then you should like the NCBA page on Facebook. The NCBA Facebook page shares photos, news, and valuable information about the beef cattle industry. You can also follow the NCBA Twitter feed at Beef USA. So stay in touch with NCBA on Facebook and Twitter.
Saddle up and make your way to Denver, Colorado for the 2019 Cattle Industry Summer Business Meeting. This is your chance to stay up to date on beef industry trends and policies. Meet with industry leaders and your fellow cattlemen and women. Plus, you'll get insights on hot topics at the Issues Forums. Mark your calendar for the 2019 Cattle Industry Summer Business Meeting, July 29th to August 1st in Denver. Details at ncba.org.
Welcome back. As we wrap up our program, I'd like to ask each of our panelists to share some final thoughts. So I guess I would be curious, for a young person watching our show, what advice would you give them about getting involved in the beef cattle industry, either as a producer or one of the other aligned industry activities? Jared?
I'd probably reiterate some of the stuff we've mentioned earlier. You know, don't be a stranger within this industry. Build your network. I mean, get out there and get to know people, and we need talent. If you're a ranch geek or a beef nerd and you want to work in this industry and your talent is graphic design or risk and numbers assessment and actuarial sciences or something, there's a place for you. So you don't have to be only involved in production. There's a place for a lot of talent in this industry, so we need you. So come on in.
Fantastic.
The water's warm.
The water's warm. I like that.
Yeah, I would say to always allow organizations like NCBA or your state association to cultivate you into a lifelong learner. So don't fall into the trap of this is what we've always done, or I can't do this because I've never done it. You have such great outlets in this industry as far as the organizations that are there to help you continue learning and improving.
That's great. It's I've often heard that it's what's most important in life is what you learn after you think you know it all, right?
Exactly.
Dusty?
I guess I'd say work hard and take advantages of the opportunities that are presented to you. If you can get a good education, that's great. If you can utilize relationships that you have developed or plan on developing, that's great. There's just so many tools to get the end means done that are available to us. You just need to keep an open mind about it.
That's great. Rossi, what would you add?
I would add that, even if you're not going into a specific agriculture job, there's still tons of opportunities for you in our industry, helping spread the word of what the agriculture industry is doing, just being involved in your county associations, your state associations, and national if you'd like to go that far, but just really just to stay involved and use your passion to share that with others.
That's fantastic. Guys, your insights are really helpful, and I have to believe they're very inspiring to so many young people who have some passion or interest or background in this industry and are just trying to figure out what is the doorway to lead to their future opportunities. So thank you so much for sharing those opportunities with us. And don't forget, every day the NCBA staff in Washington, D.C. and in Denver is working to protect the interest of cattle producers all across the country. Join in the fight to protect our way of life by becoming a member. Just call 1-866-233-3872 or visit the website ncba.org. Well, that wraps up this edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. Thanks again to our panel, and thank you for watching. We'll see you again next week, right here on RFD TV.